Hello everyone and welcome to the Sky This Month for May 2024. My name's Paul Martinitis and this show is brought to you by the Astronomical Society of South Australia. So it's a wonderful time of year to be out under our beautiful night skies. Of course we have, if you're into galaxies, we've got Virgo, Leo, Coma Berenices, well placed. So there's wonderful galaxies in that region of the sky. In terms of planetary viewing, there's not a lot happening in the evenings, but the pre-dawn skies early in the morning have some excellent opportunities to view some of the planets, including Mercury. So this month in May is a very good opportunity to look at Mercury. There's also some comets to look at. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at Pons Brooks already, but if not, you've got a little bit of time left to catch that. And then, of course, there's Comet Tsu-Shin-Shan in Virgo, which is nice and high at the moment. And that's on its way towards us. And that should hopefully peak somewhere around September and October. And if that's not enough, there's also a supernova that we're going to take a look at as well. So as usual, we'll begin with a tour of the night sky. So we're looking at the sky as it'll appear on the 15th of May at around 9 p.m. in the evening. So looking towards the west, we can see at this stage Orion is already pretty much set below the horizon, and that's closely going to be followed by Canis Major. So Canis Major is really getting a little bit low now for effective observation. But looking a little bit further up, the Argo Navis constellations are still reasonably high. So Puppis and Pyxis are still well placed, so a good opportunity to revisit some of the objects in them before they become too low. So in particular, Puppis, one of my favourite objects, is one we've talked about before, M46, that wonderful open cluster that has that foreground planetary nebula that appears within the cluster. And also Pyxis as well has another open cluster with the planetary nebula NGC 2818 as a foreground object. So two relatively unique objects very nearby in the sky. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them yet, please do take advantage of that. Looking a little bit further up still, Vela and Carina are still nice and high. In particular, the Eta Carini Nebula, which is located about here, always worth a look when you're out, particularly under a dark sky, and responds extremely well if you have an O3 filter. Looking towards the north now, and this is really a truly wonderful part of the sky that's now optimally placed for observation during May and also June, because we have some of the finest galaxies in this region of the sky, because we're looking towards the center of the Virgo supercluster, of which our own galaxy is a peripheral member. So we've got the constellation of Leo. So that was the constellation of the month for April. So if you didn't catch that show, I invite you to look at the towards the end of the video where I talk about Leo, and we looked at some of the fine objects in that constellation, including the Leo triplet, which is located about here. And I'll just remind you of that. I've got a picture of that here. Wonderful trio of galaxies, and the great thing is you can, if you've got a nice wide field eyepiece, you can actually fit them all in the same field of view. And you can't, unless you've got a very large telescope, you probably won't see the dark lane there, but you can certainly see the different morphologies of those galaxies pretty much in any reasonably sized telescope. And if you have a 10-inch, 8 to 10-inch or larger, you can usually see that dark lane here in NGC 3628 as well. And we also looked at another trio here, which included M105 and two other galaxies, and we also looked at M94 and M95 as well. So in addition to Leo, at this time we also have Virgo, nice and high in the sky, pretty much at its peak position. Below that we have Coma Berenices. Quite a faint constellation. I find these stars here, particularly under a suburban sky, but you can usually see this Y-shaped asterism of stars here. It looks like a little, like a Shanghai maybe. So once you see that Y-shaped asterism, you know that you've located the left-hand end of Coma Berenices, and that kind of forms a right-angled triangle. So between Virgo and Coma Berenices, there's some of the really the best and the brightest galaxies you can find anywhere in the sky. And one thing I always recommend at this time of year is just simply scanning across this region here, the center of which is known as Macarian's chain, a chain of galaxies starting at M86. So the easiest way to sort of point your telescope is to just really imagine a line between Beta Leonis at the tip here of Leo, Epsilon Virginis here, and you go about halfway along the line, and if you place your telescope at that point and zoom in, you will be in pretty much the right spot. So the two brightest galaxies you'll see in this region are M84 and M86, and they form the beginning of Macarian's chain, which kind of goes down in this curve that you can see here. So I would use initially at least a relatively wide field eyepiece and just simply scan my telescope along. And under a dark sky, your problem won't be so much seeing the galaxies, it'll be working out which galaxy is which is a nice problem to have. It's kind of the opposite to the normal problem we have when we're looking at dim galaxies, struggling to actually see the galaxy itself. So as you go down the chain from M84 to M86, there's also these two here, which are sometimes called Macarian's eyes. They kind of look like two eyes peering out at you. And then you can make your way all the way down to 4479. And you can see here in the field there's many other galaxies you can move off to the side and enjoy as well. And another galaxy of note up here is M87, and that's a huge elliptical galaxy, one of the largest elliptical galaxies known, at the center of the Virgo cluster. And some of you might remember the Event Horizon telescope that published the first image of a black hole's event horizon a couple of years ago. So it's a virtual radio telescope made up of a collaboration between many different telescopes located around the Earth. So here's a picture of M87, and you can see there that's the jet coming out of the supermassive black hole at the center. And some people have actually observed that jet in amateur-sized telescopes. It's a very difficult observation. It requires excellent seeing, very dark skies, and obviously a reasonably large telescope, probably 16 to 18 or larger. It's an observation I've tried a number of times and haven't been successful yet, but every year I'll keep trying, and sooner or later I'm sure I'll get it. So wonderful object to enjoy in and of itself. And there's that picture from the Event Horizon telescope. So that's the first picture in radio frequencies, of course, of a black hole's event horizon. And finally, while we're in this part of the sky, there's so many galaxies we can talk about. But just two that I really have to point out is, don't forget to take a look at the Sombrero Galaxy, M104. That's probably the galaxy with the most easily seen dust lane. I think most of you would have seen it before. Kind of looks like this, and I like this picture. It's black and white and quite grainy, and that gives you an impression very much of what it looks like through the eyepiece. Much dimmer, of course, but you can see this frosty, sort of dusty looking halo, and then through it you can see this sharp dark cut, which is the dark lane. So great galaxy to look at. And the other galaxy that also has a very prominent dark lane is M64 here, down in Coma Berenices, the so-called Black Eye Galaxy. And that kind of looks like that. That's obviously quite a high resolution photograph, but visually through the eyepiece, again you see quite a dusty sort of misty halo, a sharp bright nucleus, and underneath this dark lane, you can't really see any detail in the dark lane, but it looks like a dark crescent under the nucleus, like a dark eyelid, hence its name, the Black Eye Galaxy. Looking towards the east now, and of course, as we heading sort of past towards the end of autumn and into winter, as Orion has set, its opposite constellation Scorpius is now rising higher and higher in the sky. So you'll notice that particularly if you stay late in the evening, towards midnight and after. The center of our galaxy, which is located here between Scorpius and Sagittarius, will start rising nice and high. And one fantastic feature of this part of the sky is it's kind of just as Virgo and this region has so many galaxies, this region here around Sagittarius and Scorpius, the center of our galaxy, has so many globular clusters that you can have a look at. And if you love globular clusters, that's the region of the sky which you'll find plenty to look at. Finally, looking in the south, we can see that the Southern Cross, Crux, that's now pretty much at its optimum point, because the South Celestial Pole is pretty much halfway between Acrux and Achernar, so it's about here, and it's rotating, and you can see that Crux is pretty much at its zenith now, and above that Centaurus is also pretty much as high as it gets, so a good opportunity to look at some of the objects in Centaurus at the moment as well. So we'll now take a look at the lunar calendar for May. So we can see that at the first of the month, beginning of the month, darkness began at 1856 and went through to 5:28 in the morning. By the end of the month, nights are getting a little bit longer still, so darkness will begin a little bit earlier at 1844 and go all the way through to about 5:40 in the morning. So the dark sky period, where moon won't interfere with our observations, started at the 1st, and it will go through pretty much to the 13th or 14th. You could extend that a bit longer if you want to start your observing a little bit later and go past midnight. So the moon phases are, last quarter was on the 1st, new moon was on the 8th, first quarter will be on the 15th, full moon will be on the 23rd, and first quarter will be, last quarter will again be on the 31st of May. In terms of planetary observation, nothing's happening in the evening at the moment. You can see that Jupiter, which has been an evening object, that's now in conjunction behind the Sun and therefore unobservable throughout May. And the same applies to Uranus as well. So all of the planetary viewing will be happening in the morning on this side here. So in terms of the inner planets, Venus is also close to or in conjunction behind the Sun. So we can't look at it at the moment. But on the other hand, Mercury is at its best position for the year. So a great opportunity to look at Mercury. So we're looking here on the 9th or 10th of May, where it reached greatest elongation. So it's its largest apparent distance from the Sun from our perspective. So good opportunity to look at Mercury if you haven't looked at it for a while. And in fact, because of their configuration that you can see here in the dawn sky before sunrise, you'll see all of the planets pretty much in a line. You'll see Mercury, Mars, Neptune, and then finally Saturn. So we saw on the solar system view that the 4 planets are pretty much in a straight line in the pre-dawn skies. So this shows you the view as it'll appear through most of the month, but specifically here on the 15th of May at around 6 a.m. in the morning. So first you'll see Mercury just above the horizon. Next will come Mars, can't miss it, be that quite bright and a deep red colour. Up top will be Saturn, of course, always worth taking a look at. And in between Mars and Saturn, pretty much right in between, you'll also find Neptune, which you can see in binoculars, but better still using a telescope. So while you're out there, if you do have your binoculars, or even better, a telescope of any size, have a look at Mercury. Currently it's around half phase, a little bit before, and that'll become fuller as we progress through February. So if the skies are steady enough, you should be able to see that phase. And of course, Saturn's worth a look at as well. At the moment, the rings are relatively almost edge on. And you can also enjoy the family of planets, moons, orbiting around Saturn as well, particularly Titan, which will be the brightest and an orangey sort of colour. So at the moment, like I said, Neptune's in between Saturn and Mars, and it's a good opportunity to find Neptune because it's quite easy to locate because it's in between the circlet of Pisces here and the head of Cetus, this triangle over here to the right. So here's just a zoomed in finder chart, if you like, if you want to give finding Neptune a go. So there's Lambda Pisces on the right side of that circlet, and over here we have Kappa Cetus. So probably the easiest way to get to Neptune, I would say, is star hop from Lambda Pisces. So you've got Lambda there. You've got a slightly dimmer star here and here. So I would hop going from here to here to here. And then if you go the same distance and slightly in the upward direction, that should take you pretty much to the vicinity of Neptune. And you should be able to scoop it up in a low field eyepiece. It'll be a nice, intense little blue ball, hopefully. So I hope last month you took an opportunity to see the comet, 12P Pons Brooks, in the western sky. That was still visible through the first part of May at least, but by about the 11th or so, it's becoming a little bit more difficult to observe. But there's another comet we talked about, of course, which is Tsu-Shin-Shan. That's got the potential to reach, to be very bright between 3 and 0 in September and October. So that's something certainly worth looking forward to. But it also looks great. I had the opportunity to take a look at it from some dark skies through my 18-inch telescope, and it's looking fantastic already. You can already see the coma and a little bit of the tail. So if you manage to get your telescope out while you're enjoying the galaxies in Virgo, be sure to take a look at Tsu-Shin-Shan as well and see how it's looking. And that's something we can enjoy and hopefully continue to brighten as we approach September and October. And a particularly easy time to find the comet will be around the 13th to the 15th, because you can see it's really following across the midpoint between Gamma Virginis and Delta Virginis. So if you just trace a line between those two stars halfway, and the comet between the 13th and the 15th is pretty much at that midpoint, so it should be fairly easy to sweep up in your telescope. And finally, like I mentioned last time, if you want to know more about comets in general, and particularly Tsu-Shin-Shan, Matty Arts, I did a fantastic talk for ASA about a month ago. So if you just go to the ASA YouTube website and go onto the live tab, where we do our live streamings of our meetings, typically there's a talk there all about comets, which I highly recommend if you haven't looked at it yet. So our constellation of the month for May is Hydra, the female water snake. It's the longest of all of the constellations, snaking its way all the way from the north here, past the top of Leo and Virgo, towards the west, and ends around Libra. And at the moment, it's part of it's actually coming right across the zenith of the sky. So the constellation itself, the brightest star, Alpha, is about magnitude 2, I think, perhaps a little bit brighter. Most of the other stars are between 3 and 4, so not super dim. But of course, the difficulty of picking out Hydra is because it's so spread out in such a long constellation, is picking out the stars that belong to it from the stars around it. So we're going to look at 4 objects in Hydra, and we'll look at them in order as we move along from this direction. And our first port of call is going to be this one here, NGC 3242, or the Ghost of Jupiter Planetary Nebula, which we've seen a number of times before, and many of you will be familiar with. So this is a fantastic planetary, really placed nice and high in the sky at the moment. So it's a great time to be observing it. And this photo is obviously taken through a large telescope, but it shows much of the detail you can see through the telescope. A reasonably large aperture, let's say 8 or 10 inches above, and importantly, if you have good seeing. Good seeing probably affects planetary nebulas more than other nebulas because they often have sharp detail that we want to examine at high magnification. So I recommend trying an O3 filter with this planetary. Can sometimes enhance the features. Without the filter, it also looks great. It has that beautiful aquamarine color that you can see there in the photo. You can certainly usually see the central star in it. And if the seeing is good and you use plenty of magnification, you can also see this inner ring, or this, and it looks kind of like an eye looking at you. So as with most planetary nebula, I recommend trying a variety of magnifications, but go as high as you can. Push the magnification until you feel that you're starting to lose detail, and try with and without an O3 filter as well. Now, our next destination is a nice globular cluster, M68. So that is a relatively distant globular cluster. It's quite bright, but because of its distance, it's difficult to fully resolve. So I find in a smaller telescope, such as an 8 to 12 inch, the core usually remains sort of quite motley under moderate magnification, and you can start to sort of resolve the outer stars. In my 18-inch telescope, using plenty of magnification, I think I used about 200 times, I can almost fully resolve the core, not quite. So the more magnification, the better with this globular cluster. And to find this globular, we're just going to follow Hydra a little bit along to here. So you can see that M68 is between Hydra and it's quite near the star Beta Corvus. And in fact, if you're star hopping to it rather than using setting circles, your best bet is probably to start at Beta Corvus. And then it's about, so if I put my Telrad here on Beta Corvus, and we're moving there about 4 degrees or so till we find M68. Now, I was going to go into order, but I did skip the most important object at the moment, which I wanted to show you, which is the fantastic galaxy NGC 3621. So there's the ghost of Jupiter that we looked at first. Here's M68. So halfway along in between them is this fantastic galaxy. So it's a little bit hard to star hop to. Your best bet would probably be starting at Chi Hydra, and it's about, let's see, it's probably about 4 degrees from Chi Hydra in this direction. I must admit, when I've been finding it, particularly under a suburban sky, I've been able to use my digital setting circles to do so. So it's a great galaxy in and of itself, but the great thing is at the moment, it's got a supernova in it, which is quite easy to observe. So this is a sort of a picture of the galaxy, and I really like this picture. This was provided by ASA member Kim Falasudis, and it's a lovely view of the galaxy. Kind of gives you an impression of what it looks like through a reasonably large aperture. You can really see that mottling around the core, and you'll know you got the right galaxy because it's got this distinct triangle of 3 stars framing one end of it. And the supernova, which is supernova 24 GGI, has been visible for about a month now, and it's very easy to locate because it's in the upper side of the triangle here. So you just imagine the 2 sides of the triangle, and you'll see a star that's sort of dented in on one side, and it's about as bright as this star here, which is magnitude 12.9. So that'll be the supernova. So as far as supernovas go, not only is it pretty bright, you should be able to see it in an 8-inch or even maybe a 6-inch telescope under high magnification, under dark skies. It's really easy to be sure that you're looking at the correct one. So I've really enjoyed observing this supernova after the past month or so, and apparently it's a type 2 supernova, and it's one of the plateauing types. So they can go two ways with type 2 supernova. So they're the ones that are caused by a core collapse rather than a type 1 where you've got typically some sort of white dwarf with a companion that's dumped material onto the white dwarf and taken it past the Chandrasekhar limit. So in this case, it's a core collapse supernova, and they typically have two types. One is they peak, and then the magnitude descends at a fairly linear rate, and then you have the plateauing type, which this is, where it sort of has a peak brightness, drops a bit, and then it stays very steady and just drops very, very slowly. So this one has been around this magnitude 12.5, between 12.5, 13 for probably about at least 3 weeks now, and it will hopefully be continued to be viewable for some time. So I really encourage you to get out and try and have a look at it. Just one word of warning: if you go looking for it under a city sky, which I did with my 18-inch, the stars and the supernova itself, of course, were very easy to observe, but the galaxy itself is totally obliterated by light pollution. So don't be surprised if you're not under a dark sky, if you see the star pattern, but the galaxy itself you probably won't see a sign of. But under a dark sky, the galaxy itself is really fantastic as well. And finally, I have to end on this. This is really one of the greatest face-on spirals, certainly in the southern sky, M83, sometimes called the southern pinwheel. So this is a picture taken through an infrared telescope, but I kind of like it because if you imagine a much dimmer version of this, it kind of shows you what M83 can look like through a large telescope, between 12 and 18 inches under really optimal observing conditions. So you can see the bar, you can see the nucleus, you can certainly see the arms, generally with direct vision, and you get just a little hint of sparkliness through it, of perhaps, I suspect, some of these hydrogen alpha regions that are starting to partially resolve. But this is a fantastic galaxy to look at through any size telescope. You'll at least see the core and the bar and the outer shape of the halo, even if you can't resolve the arms themselves. The only prerequisite is, like all face-on spirals, surface brightness is relatively dim, so you will need a really, really dark sky to see it at its best. Thanks everyone for joining me in today's show. There's some fantastic objects out there this month to look at. In addition to all the great galaxies, of course, you've got that supernova, relatively easy to observe and find, and you've also got one or two comets to take a look at as well. So it really, really doesn't get better than that. So I wish you clear skies, and I look forward to seeing you in the June show. Bye for now.